Hello everybody, I'm coming in for the video today on the second topic that I've chosen. Even though it is a day late to be technically counted as last week, I still am going to post it today. So the topic I've chosen, I did mention it in the discussion page, but I'm pretty sure most people don't even bother looking there anymore, if ever. So honestly, I'll just say it again here. Today's topic is on not reunification, but unification of basically the formation of the country of Italy during the late 19th century. Now, this is a topic that's actually kind of new to me, and I felt that I just wanted to try something new. I wanted to get out of the American history here for a bit because I've been doing a lot of that lately. I wanted to do something more in the world category and not something that was extremely well known, like something like a big major war or more modern world history. So I chose this instead. So that is what today's video will be about. Now, I'm going to say this at the beginning instead of at the end. There will be an announcement video coming out tomorrow for a announcement as to what the next big series of videos is going to be here coming the end of June into early July. I will give you a very big hint. It does coincide with the 4th of July here in the United States, so you can probably guess what that might be. I will make the announcement video tomorrow that will cover what that is, cover some smaller issues here that I'd just like to clarify and stuff like that, and that will be put up tomorrow. So, for this video today, I suppose we need to get moving on it. So this is the unification of Italy that led to its formation. And keep in mind, I think you probably know where Italy is, because if not, you've probably not lived for the past 100 years or more. I don't know if you realize this, but when we look at a map of Europe, Italy is the country that commonly looks like a boot. It's a little big old peninsula near in the Mediterranean. I think most of you know where Italy is, so I'm not really going to bother showing you an image on the globe. I would think you'd know where that is. If not, you know what its food tastes like, because I can guarantee you've ate at Olive Garden. But anyway, so the Kingdom of Italy, as it was then, Italy is now a republic, but back then it was a kingdom. And even before this, before 1860, there was no Italy. The Italian peninsula was divided into individual Italian states, and it kind of remained this way ever since the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD. We are in 2020 AD. So roughly, it was almost 2,000-year span that Italy was divided on the peninsula. There was no Kingdom of Italy at all. It was just a bunch of Italian states. People didn't refer to themselves as Italian. They referred to themselves as Genoese or Venetian or Sicilian. Oh, what's another one here? Sardinian. They would prefer themselves as that. They did not consider themselves Italian because they did not consider they were one nation. They belonged to individual separate states, or kingdoms in some cases. Now, this remained largely the same until the 19th century rolls around, almost. At the very end of the 18th century, actually, and that is when our wonderful, good French dictator Napoleon I, the great French emperor, in 1796, 1796, I'm looking at the notebook here. In 1796, Napoleon invaded Italy as part of his grand conquest of Europe. But, ironically, Napoleon felt sympathy for Italy a little bit because he had actually, if I'm not wrong, he'd been born in Sardinia, which is today part of Italy. And he basically, when he conquered the Italian states on the peninsula, he reestablished some and drew borders distinctly, but he also brought the French sense of liberalism, which dictated that people that are alike need to be one united people. They need to be together as a nation. And this, even though Napoleon ended up being defeated in 1815, and at the Congress of Vienna after the Napoleonic Wars that kind of redrew the line maps of Europe, although in Italy the lines were basically redrawn to what they had been prior to Napoleon's little invasion, the French sense of liberalism that Napoleon and his troops had brought to the Italian peninsula never really went away, even though he had been long gone. And it really started to urge more of the people on the Italian peninsula into the belief that they are one people and they should be a single nation, not a collection of separate little individual states. Now, this was also a bad thing for some because the Italian peninsula, again, was very divided at this time. We're going to go through here what we have on what political situation is on the Italian peninsula, what countries, what states do we have. Now, remember, there's no single one that's called Italy. There's no Italy at all. It's separate states, but some of them are named after areas or islands, such as in the northern, well, actually in the south, in the southern part of the peninsula, you had the kingdom known as the Kingdom of Two Sicilies, which was basically the city of Naples and the island of Sicily off Italy's southern coast. Got the ball, if you will, that the boot looks like it's getting ready to kick. The Papal States were in the center of the peninsula. These were mostly ruled by the Pope and the Catholic of the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. It was mostly ruled by him. This was in the central, and this included Rome. This included Rome, the big ancient city. And these papal states, however they pronounce them, they were basically aided by France, because France was heavily Catholic. It still is, to my knowledge. In the north, you have a couple of, this is where you have some problems on the peninsula, and you have these separate individual states. You have Modena, you have Parma, you have Tuscany, and you have smaller states such as Venetia and Lombardy, but Lombardy and Venetia are part of the Austrian Empire. Austria controls these areas. And Modena, Parma, and Tuscany are Austrian client states. They basically bow down to whatever Austria tells them they need to do. The only truly independent country on the entire Italian peninsula was actually on the island of Sardinia, and it had territory in the northwestern part of Italy. Now, Sardinia at this time was also known as Piedmont, which is what we're going to call it, Piedmont. And just for a map here of what Italy is looking like at this time, this is in 1829, as the map actually says. And we're going to reference this a couple times here. This down here is the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. This is where we have Naples and Sicily. Here's Sicily. This is an island where Palermo is, and then you have Naples up here. All southern Italy is down here. The Papal States, run by the Pope, with Rome at its main headquarters. This is in the purple. In central Italy, right here is about where Rome is. You have Tuscany, which is an Austrian client state. You have some smaller ones up here, such as Parma, Modena. The yellow up here is Lombardy, which is about right here. And then you have Venetia over here, and then Austria is over here. But the yellow is all controlled by Austria. And then finally, we have this small area right here in northwestern Italy, and this island, which is Sardinia's territory, also known as Piedmont. And this right here is the only truly independent state on the Italian peninsula, and this is the one we are going to focus the most about because they're the ones that actually bring Italy together. Now, in the first half of the 19th century, due to the sense of liberalism that was left on the Italian peninsula after the withdrawal of the French forces of Napoleon after the Napoleonic Wars, increased calls for Italian unification were kind of gaining pitch in favor with many of the civilians in the country. And there were a lot of liberal revolutionaries who wanted to fight and take this too seriously. The only threat they realized was that Austria controlled a large amount of the northern part of the country, either directly or through pressure. And if they were going to unite Italy, Austria was going to see this as a threat. So Austria was really going to be the big buffer here as to trying to form a united country on the Italian peninsula. Plus, Austria wasn't going to be willing to lose client states, and it probably wasn't going to be willing to lose any territory. They were one of the big monarchies of Europe at the time. So what happens is there's many revolutions that start breaking out in the 1830s, and basically what happens here is a bunch of them led by the liberal revolutionary Giuseppe Mazzini. They helped lead a series of revolts in the year 1830. However, these revolts fail, and Mazzini and his other revolutionaries, which include the very famous Giuseppe Garibaldi, they then flee to France, where they're giving exile aid. And this was all failed because the Austrians started cracking down. The moment the Italians start to vie for their independence, start to vie for unification, Austria cracks down. This kind of hampered it for decades to come. And it was mostly due to the factor that although many Italian liberals wanted to unite the country, many of them didn't exactly agree on how it should be. Some, like the kingdom of Piedmont here, or Sardinia, they wanted a united kingdom of Italy. They wanted a whole united kingdom of Italy. No state was separate. It was all united. While others, such as Mazzini, wished for kind of a confederacy of Italian states on the peninsula, which they hoped would be led by the Pope, because the Italian people on the peninsula, even though they're not Italian people, they are all Roman Catholic majority. Most of them are Roman Catholic. So of course they see the Pope as good somewhat. The only unifying factor that really any of these revolutionaries had on the Italian peninsula was the factor that they had heavy resentment toward Austria's influence and Austrian rule. They heavily resented Austria. That's about the only thing that's really they could agree on. In 1846, as revolutions break out again in Italy, they also sweep across Europe up till 1848. This was a big year of revolutions that kind of marked the end of a certain political ideology that we call Romanticism, and this was the idea that people were going to get together by some God-driven force, just come together and get things done. And it kind of died off as all these revolutionaries mostly failed, and people came to realize if you're going to get it done, you can't just expect God to do it all the time. Sometimes you got to do it by yourself. In their minds, I'm not saying that ain't true. But in their minds, they got the idea that we can't just hope and pray all the time that people are going to do the right thing. Sometimes we just got to do it. In 1846, revolutions began to break out once again on the Italian peninsula and coincide with these European revolutions. But since they're also breaking out in Europe, Austria is suffering its own revolutions in its country, and this is weakening Austria's hold on the country of Italy. This weakens their hold. The many revolutions that break out, though, do eventually fail. None of them really succeed. But there are two that actually do here in Italy, and that's with two small things. One is Piedmont. Piedmont does have a small revolution, but it ends in a good manner, and that's the fact that Piedmont's king, Charles Albert was his name, he issues a new constitution for the country that satisfies the people of his nation, and under pressure from liberal revolutionaries within Piedmont, he invades the Austrian-held lands in northern Italy, chiefly Lombardy, which is where Milan is located, if you know where that Italian city is. And they aid the rebels there as well. And he's pressured by the liberals in his own government, in his own country, after he adopts this new constitution, to gain more of Italy for Piedmont. And he does give the authority to invade the Austrian-held province of Lombardy, where Milan is. Now, at first, yes, they are successful, but eventually the Austrians, under their Marshal Radetzky, they do force the Piedmontans back, and they have to sign an armistice with Austria. So it becomes clear they cannot do this on their own. Piedmont will not be able to unite Italy on its own. It needs some kind of help. Well, that is what Piedmont does here. Now, Giuseppe Mazzini, who we had previously kind of mentioned, he's also moving during this time period once again during these revolutions, and he actually succeeds. Mazzini actually causes Pope Pius IX to flee Rome. The Pope's out of Rome. He flees because Mazzini and his revolutionaries attack the city. They go in and try to take it. And after the Pope flees, he actually forms a new Republic of Rome in November of 1848. Now, this is much to the chagrin of the country of France, who at the time was a republic, although its president was basically Napoleon I's nephew, Napoleon III, who was going to declare himself emperor here in a few short years. And France didn't really like that Mazzini had taken control of Rome because they didn't like the thought that the heart of the Catholic world, again, France is mostly Catholic, had fallen to a revolutionary people. And so in response, the French Republic sends troops to occupy Rome, and they actually take it and dissolve Mazzini's Republic of Rome. After this fails here, and they actually restore the Pope in 1849 when they take Rome back. So roughly just months after the Republic of Rome is declared, the French kind of come in, they occupy Rome, and they actually keep troops there. And that's going to be a hindrance for years. Is that the French kept troops in Rome in the Papal States. Now Mazzini kind of gives up after this a little bit, but his partner Giuseppe Garibaldi, he flees to the independent city of San Marino, and we are going to see more of him here shortly, and we will show a picture of him too. Now, there was a second attempt. Piedmont makes a second attempt after the Mazzini revolutionaries take control of Rome. They make a second attempt to go to war with Austria, but this goes horribly, and so King Charles Albert of Piedmont, he abdicates because of the failure of his government, and he abdicates in favor of his son Victor Emmanuel II. And this is in March of 1849, I believe. We're going through here. Now I'm going to show you a picture. This is Victor Emmanuel II, the new king of Piedmont, and will soon be the first king of the Kingdom of Italy. This is Victor Emmanuel II. Yes, very pronounced Italian mustache. There, that's him. By 1850, not much has changed after the series of revolutions in the 1840s and 1830s, and the Italian peninsula is still largely in this very sorry condition. It's still not unified. The only changes that have really occurred were the fact that French forces were now basically occupying Rome, and there was a new constitution in Piedmont. Now, King Victor Emmanuel II, he holds a very difficult relationship with his new prime minister, and his prime minister is Camillo Benso, who is the Count of Cavour. So we call him Camillo di Cavour, or Cavour, as however you want to say it. But this is his prime minister. He's probably the most successful parliamentarian in Italian history, although he wasn't exactly the most democratic guy. He was kind of very aggressive in his foreign policy. Very aggressive at trying to unify Italy, but it worked. Now, Cavour was a moderate in politics, and he wished to kind of model Piedmont after Britain's economic model to make it wealthy and able to resort to a strong diplomacy. To try to do this, when the Crimean War breaks out in 1853, and we'll have to do a separate video on that one day. I don't know everything about it, but on the Crimean War that breaks out in 1853, Cavour actually has Piedmont get involved and ally with Britain and France and the others that are fighting against Russia to try to help them in order to try to enlist British and French aid for reunification of Italy and for war against Austria, to try to retake these lands from Austria. Now, his hopes are on the British going to help them. Unfortunately, the British decline after the war is done and they have won. The British do decline to help Piedmont. But France, with Napoleon III now as the new emperor, yes, because he had to be just like his uncle, and he kind of upset the Republic, he agrees to help them. He does enlist France's aid to Piedmont on a couple of conditions, though. And this is in 1853. Britain does decline it. Now, Napoleon does agree to help Piedmont on a couple of conditions, and here's what he put. He agrees to help as long as the Papal States that are run by the Pope remain okay where they are. Like, you cannot hurt the Pope because we're Catholic and we don't want you getting rid of the Papal States. He wants Piedmont to give them the city of Nice, and Napoleon also wishes that Piedmont remain under French guidance. So, eager to take any deal that he could get, Cavour actually took the deal with Napoleon III and then had French aid secured in 1858 with the signed deal. So this sets the stage for the reunification finally to really occur, and it starts a year later, in 1859. In 1859, there is a staged uprising that occurs in the Austrian client state of Modena. And when this happens, Piedmont almost immediately, they quickly aid the rebels there that are causing this uprising. I shouldn't put hashtag, but quotations around staged, because it was kind of instigated with Piedmont's thing, so they knew it was happening, and they were just waiting for the official mark to go ahead and give them the aid. And this, of course, causes Austria to intervene because it's a rebellion in one of its client states. It kind of exercised control over here, kind of like the Soviet Union did in the Eastern European countries after World War II, like Poland and them, in the Iron Curtain. Kind of the same prospect. Now, due to this, Piedmont goes to war with Austria. And when they go to war with Austria, instead of being alone, France comes to their side. It comes and aids Piedmont, and they fight together with Piedmont against Austria to try to gain these lands for Piedmont to take, mainly Lombardy and northern Italy. And also to kind of distract the Austrians, they enlist the help of the exiled revolutionary Giuseppe Garibaldi, who is still in exile in San Marino. Piedmont kind of enlists his help in fighting, even though they don't see on the same terms, because Garibaldi is a Republican. He views kings as a wrong cause. He views them as corrupt. And although they both want the unification of the Italian peninsula, Garibaldi does not exactly. He knows that Piedmont would like to put their own king as the head of charge of the state, and he doesn't exactly side with a monarchy. But regardless of this, they give Garibaldi, kind of get him to come to aid to them, and they basically provide him some troops. And Garibaldi fights with his guerrilla army of what becomes known as the Red Shirts, which were basically most of them were teenage boys, and they go around doing guerrilla warfare with the Austrian forces in and around the Papal States and the Austrian client states. And this kind of distracts the Austrian forces. And they're highly successful. Garibaldi is excellent when he does this. This kind of distracts Austrian forces from engaging the French and the Piedmontans when they invade Austrian territory. Do excuse me, my allergies have been acting up lately. Now, basically, the client states, due to the fact that Garibaldi is fighting within them, he's fighting the Austrians within them, they see that Piedmont is going against Austria and they have French support. The client states of Modena, Parma, Lombardy, and Tuscany, they all ally together with Piedmont, and they form a union, which they call let me see here, what do they call it? The United Provinces of Central Italy, and this really is what starts what in Italy is referred to as the Second War of Italian Independence, since they considered the first one to be during the 1840s, which had failed, but this one actually will succeed. So there's two major battles that occur during this fighting, and it's mostly with the Piedmont and French forces against the Austrians, and that is the Battle of Magenta and the Battle of Solferino. And Solferino is actually so bloody that it creates the not the American, but it leads to the creation of the Red Cross, because it's so bloody. And both of these, the French and Piedmontans won. They beat Austria badly. However, things are about to come to a different kind of turntable here. Now, after these battles, France was kind of fearing that Prussia, who they were rapidly beginning to fear, even though Italy had no fear of Prussia because it really didn't deal with them, France has got a border with Prussian states, and as we all know at this time, the states in Prussia, which is Germany, by the way, they're gaining power, and they're starting to kind of come to terms with Austria, with who's going to be the main dominant state in Germany, who's going to unite Germany. And since they border France, France sees them as a threat. So it's because he starts fearing that Prussia is going to intervene in this war, he makes a secret peace with the Austrians without telling Piedmont, without telling Camillo di Cavour or King Victor Emmanuel II. So Napoleon backs out of the war secretly without telling them, and signs a secret peace with Austria. And when the news reaches Piedmont, everyone is outraged. They think that the French have betrayed Piedmont, and Cavour is actually so angry that he actually resigns from his post as prime minister. So the French helped him, but it didn't gain him much. Now, regardless of this, although the Piedmontans were angry that France had ended the war early when they could have gained more territory, it does succeed in giving some territory, and that's the factor that end of this war, at the end of the war, Piedmont does get Lombardy from Austria. They finally get Lombardy, and Savoy and Nice, which were Piedmontine provinces and cities, are handed over to France in return. Now, remember Lombardy, in case you don't know that province in Italy, if you've heard of the city of Milan, which in here sounds like Milan, but in there it's Milan. If you know where that is in Lombardy. And I'll show you on a map here what they've managed to secure. At the end of 1859, the Kingdom of Piedmont, right here's Milan, has secured this little chunk, this little circle right here, is Lombardy. This is what they secured. Add on to this. Now, right here's here is the states that have allied with them, the central states in Italy, these orange green. Now, these states, immediately after the war, they fall into turmoil. They fall into chaos. People are uprising and everything. They realize they can't really survive on their own. And so there's a desperate plea that comes out from these states for Piedmont to simply annex them into Piedmont, since it's becoming the most dominant power on the peninsula and they want to be part of a united Italy. And Piedmont readily and happily takes the offer. And so in 1860, they annex the Austrian, not the Austrian, but the central Italian states of Parma, Modena, Tuscany. They incorporate into them. So now, let me see if I got a pen here. Maybe I can draw something. I don't know how well you're going to see this. Okay, let me see. Okay, what I got scribbled in pen, I know you probably can't read names now, but what I have scribbled in pen, this is what is now part of Italy. I know that's probably not the best thing, but that's the only way I can really point it out to you. What is scribbled in pen by the end of by 1860, beginning of 1860, this is what Piedmont now controls of Italy. Now, this province over here, they're angry at not getting. They did not secure the province of Venetia, which has the city of Venice, the one with all the canals in it. This is still Austrian territory, and they still heavily want this territory. But they also want Rome, which is controlled by the Papal States, and they still need to get the south. So this is not done. And this is where Garibaldi comes into play. Garibaldi has run a successful guerrilla war against the Austrians during the war. And he then subsequently turns his attention to the south after doing so. And in 1859, the year prior to the big annexation, in 1859, there is a rebellion that breaks out on the island of Sicily, that little ball at the bottom. And Garibaldi takes advantage of this. He and 1,000 of his red shirts launch a seaborne little cross thing. Literally, they set out from Naples, I think, and they sail right over here to the island of Sicily. And then he and 1,000 of his red shirt army invade Sicily, and they take it. They conquer. Uh, they conquer Sicily. They take the island. So Sicily's now been taken, and this is known as the March. Oh, not that. It's known as the. Let me see here. Expedition of the Thousand is what the Italians know this as. Now, a few months afterward, Garibaldi then goes up here into the Kingdom of Naples. Well, Naples. He's taken Sicily. I'm not going to color in it because it's not Piedmont territory. And then he takes all this in the yellow. Easily. They're weak. And all southern Italy is now in Garibaldi. All that yellow is now in Garibaldi's control at the bottom of Italy. So he takes control of all this within just months. And he easily does it with just 1,000 men. It shows you how weak the kingdom of the Two Sicilies was. And Piedmont subsequently they watch what Garibaldi's doing, and due to how successful he's doing, they kind of fear maybe he's going to try to form a raw government, so they need to grab more. And Piedmont subsequently, they follow after the invasion of Sicily and the taking of southern Italy by Garibaldi, They invade and take most of the Papal States except for Rome and San Marino. San Marino is agreed will stay an independent city as it was since the days of the Roman Empire. And Rome, the only reason they don't take Rome is because there's French forces in the city. And the fear is that if Piedmont invades and tries to take Rome, they may come into conflict with the French troops, leading to a war of France, which they don't want. So that's the only reason they leave Rome out. So now we have all the Papal States for not Sardinia, but Piedmont is what we're going to call it. So I'm going to color all this in. I'm not going to all this purple, except for I'm going to kind of leave a gap here around Rome. Except for Rome. Here, I'm going to draw circles around these two cities. This is what Piedmont now has. Piedmont has conquered most of the Papal States except for San Marino right here. I think this is San Marino, is it? Looking at the right thing? Yeah, I'm looking at the right thing. Reminder, this appears the other way to me when I'm doing this. And this right here is Rome. These are the only two areas they leave out, but the rest of it is all theirs. Now, this is all Garibaldi's, so are we going to have to go to war with Garibaldi to secure this for Piedmont, or is there going to be a peaceful kind of deal here that kind of plays out? And it ends up being very peaceful, actually. And in 1860, the southern Italy, where Garibaldi has already conquered, they actually hold a referendum over whether or not they want to unify with Piedmont. Do they want to join with them? And Garibaldi allows this to happen, and 96% of the votes that come in from the referendum vote in favor of unifying with Piedmont, and thus Garibaldi does not have any opposition to this. And he meets with King Victor Emmanuel II at Teano, and he hands him the control of Naples and the rest of the entire south of Italy, including Sicily. Now, this was kind of very showing of Garibaldi's character, because despite the fact that he was a Republican and very opposed to monarchy and kings, he put his political thinking aside for just the simple purpose of unifying Italy. It would be simpler just to allow this to happen because it would be easier and quicker to get Italy unified this way than it would be to fight it out over a political difference. So it really testifies to his character. He was a really good man. And just so we know, I will show him a photo. This is the portrait we have of Giuseppe Garibaldi, the big Italian patriot revolutionary, whatever you want to call him, very famous in Italy and kind of across the world. He was very admired across the world during his life for what he had done. This is him, the leader of the red shirts. So now that Garibaldi has handed over control of southern Italy, all of this down here is under Piedmont control. Italy is basically united, mostly. All this is now what they control. They control most of Italy except for Rome, San Marino. With San Marino, they still don't control today because no one ever makes it. So we'll leave. This will be the only circle left. But they still got to get this, and they still got to get Venetia up here from Austria. They still got to get that. Now, immediately after the annexation of the southern part of the Italian peninsula, after Garibaldi hands it over at Teano in 1860, on March 17th of 1861, after some preparations, the Kingdom of Italy is officially declared by Piedmont, and its capital is declared to be at Florence, which is actually in Tuscany, and Florence is about right here. This is where Florence is, because remember, they don't have Rome yet, so they're going to declare the capital somewhere else. Florence, they declare the capital in Florence, and King Victor Emmanuel II of Piedmont becomes King Victor Emmanuel II of Italy. Italy is officially formed. We have Italy finally on the table in 1861. Ironically, the same year the U.S. starts breaking apart. So one country comes together, another breaks apart. Now, the king and his recently restored prime minister, Camillo Cavour, actually comes back to his resigned post of prime minister. He is restored, and they try to bridge the big gap between the North and South. The North is heavily industrialized, and the South is largely agricultural and lacks in industry. Now, this goes horribly, and it doesn't really do anything good, and there's a kind of a difficulty at trying to get people in the peninsula to think themselves as not Genoese or Naples or Piedmontese or Venetian or Sicilian, but to think of themselves as Italian, that we are one people. And also to note, the flag of Italy is from the flag of Italy comes from Piedmont, who had adopted the flag earlier in the late 1840s. It is you can look it up. I'm pretty sure you've probably seen it before. It's the green, white, and red tricolor. And at the time, it had like a cross in the middle, what was surrounded by a blue shield in the white part of this tricolor. Today, it no longer has that. It's just a simple tricolor. It's because, and no, this is not Mexico's flag, because Mexico has the eagle on the cactus with the snake in the middle of a lake in its mouth on the Mexican flag, on their tricolor. This is the Italian tricolor. So the Italian flag is taken from the flag of Piedmont. So that occurs on that. Now, there's much turmoil in the South, not only due to the attempts to bridge the gap, but in these attempts, taxes start skyrocketing to try to boost up production in the South, and the wealth gap from the North becomes increasingly large, and this actually causes some revolutions that occur in the South, but they're brutally put down by Piedmont to keep the country together. Now, the Pope, at the same time, is expressing anger at Piedmont in Italy, which is now Italy. He is expressing anger at them for his loss of territory because he lost most of his territory when the Papal States were taken. Now, King Victor Emmanuel II, he still wishes to gain Venetia, which has Venice, and which is still under Austrian rule, but he also wants Rome, which is basically still under a French occupation, and thus any move to take Rome could lead to a war with France, which they don't want. Because, believe me or not, Napoleon III was a scary guy. He was just like his uncle. He was very willing to go to war, and very frightening if he did. Now, that brings us here to what we're going to have to go through to get these final two pieces of territory. In 1866, there's a war that breaks out between Austria and Prussia, the Austro-Prussian War. Prussia and Austria are basically fighting out to see who's going to become the dominant state in Germany, who's going to be the leader. And eventually, Prussia does win this. Now, Italy takes advantage of this war, and they come to the Prussian side on the condition that if they help Prussia out, Prussia will try to boost for the province of Venetia to be given to Italy. Now, Prussia wins because they do well in the war, but Italian help kind of struggles. The Italian help don't really do too much in the war. So, since Prussia won, Austria is forced to give up the province of Venetia. And this is all in 1866, because this war actually lasts only weeks. And they are forced to give up Venetia. But instead of giving it to Italy, who they deem don't really deserve it because they did so poorly in the war compared to the Prussians, they give it to France. Now, this really doesn't do anything because within just a couple months, France returns and gives Venetia to Italy. It returns it as a sense of goodwill, if you will, to Italy. So now we have Venetia. Venetia is now Italian control. Now we have all this, but we still have this in Austria. And this will actually remain until 1918, until the end of World War I. That will be a lot of fighting up in this section during World War I, during the war between 1914 and 1918. But that will not be united at this time period. So now all that remains to really cover is Rome. How do we get Rome? And this is very simple, and that it again deals with Prussia. Geez, those Germans are very smart and very convenient. Now, what happens is Rome still remains for Italy to obtain, but the French troops are still there. They don't know how to really do it without causing war. Well, they get their answer just 4 years later in 1870, when the Franco-Prussian War breaks out between France and Prussia. And ultimately, Napoleon III is actually captured during this war, and it leads to the establishment of a united Germany. Germany is officially declared as the new German Empire, which is what we'll fight in World War I. And we will do a video on that someday. I don't know when. But that is how that war ends up. But during this, And again, that one's only a couple weeks as long as well. The Prussians are very good at war. But anyway, Italy takes advantage because of one critical thing that happens during the Franco-Prussian War is in order to fight Prussia, France pulls out most of its troops out of Rome. They're no longer protecting the Pope. They're no longer in Rome. The Italians can go into Rome and take it without possibly having to fearing going to war with France. And they take advantage of this. And literally, as soon as the French weaken their hold on Rome in 1870, the Italians march in and take the city. Now, they come to a certain agreement with the Pope that he could still have certain authority. He could still maintain the Vatican as a separate entity, but he's still not very happy about it. But they do make concession to him a little bit. But in 1870, they do gain Rome, and in 1871, the Kingdom of Italy officially moves its capital from Florence to Rome. And this happens in 1871. So as of now, Rome captured. This is what Italy looks like in, I'm going to cross out the year, 1871. Everything except for this small part, but they will not gain that until after World War I, so that's a different story. So that's Italy up to the early 20th century. That's how we unite Italy. No, not exactly the most promising thing, but that's how it all occurs. So that is the basis on Italian unification as that happened. Now, again, I will be posting the announcement video tomorrow over certain things, including the big announcement for our upcoming video series that I will be doing here come the end of June, going to that first week of July. So I will be announcing what that is tomorrow. So hopefully everyone does well on that. Hopefully everyone will get to see that when it goes on. Feel free to give feedback on that. Other than that, that's all I really have for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe. If you view these videos and you kind of come back once in a while, don't be afraid to hit the subscribe button. Don't, because there'll be plenty more on the way. And again, always feel free to give me any suggestions for any videos that you may want to hear on a topic about. I would be more than happy to do them. And I will even put aside my plans if I get a suggestion, so feel free to do that. So that's all for this video. Hope everyone has a wonderful final day of May, and let us hopefully begin summer well, and I will see you hopefully sometime this coming week, if not tomorrow, for the announcement video. So long, have a good rest of your day, and God bless you all.